Jason, can I come to you now?
Thank you, Chair. I just have a question to everyone. What is your assessment of the systems that are in place to review existing licences when circumstances change in the destination country or when new information comes to light? Let's start with Sam.
So there very often seems to be a pattern when circumstances change. In principle, there are mechanisms, they exist, for reviews to happen. In principle, there is supposed to be a commitment to do so when circumstances change. In practice, the most we usually see maybe a small number of revocations or suspensions of licenses, but mostly what we see is a suspension of issuing of new licenses, which is something, but especially as so much of UK arms exports go through open licenses, probably about half, based on the sort of relative figures for contracts and for single licenses. And open licenses are valid for 3 or 5 years, open individual export licenses. OGLs are valid indefinitely. As Ollie said, in the Saudi and Saudi coalition case, the countries were taken off the OGLs for new registrations, but all the companies, like certainly BAE Systems, who are already registered, will continue to do so. This means that a suspension of new licenses has only a limited effect on what is actually being exported. And while the government does have the power to, if they want to, quite quickly review and suspend or revoke existing licenses, it seems something that in practice they are very reluctant to do in most cases.
So in your experience, Sam, how effective is the monitoring that takes place on particular countries in order to be ready to block or suspend licenses to those destinations?
It seems to only happen when there's something really major that comes up, and because a large proportion of exports are components and subsystems, it's very hard to precisely identify which systems they are in and what is being done with them. So, for example, the British government has admitted this itself in relation to exports to Israel, which is all components. They were able to establish in 2008 that there were UK components in some of the weapons that Israel used in Gaza. They have not made any similar assessment, as far as we know, in relation to subsequent outbreaks of war between Israel and Gaza. And it seems that in general, and again from the limited amount we've known from government statements over the years, they don't make any great effort to assess exactly what happens with UK components and subsystems that are going into certain main systems that may be used in various conflicts. Of course, in Saudi Arabia, we know it's the actual planes and bombs that are being used. That in a lot more cases, it's the components which are much harder to track and where there seems to be not very much effort.
Thank you, Sam. I'll close it there, Chair.
Can I make just one very quick point, if I may? And that is that if you want to, I think the UK tends to be very reactive when it comes to stopping its practice rather than proactive. But if you want to have an impact immediately, if the situation has deteriorated to the point where you want to have an impact, the way you have an impact immediately is by suspending existing licenses, which, as Sam said, is the last thing that happens. New license is a process. When you're applying for a license, it's not as if you're going to deliver tomorrow. That delivery is going to be some way off in the future. So if you want to have an impact on a situation that's gone bad, you suspend licenses. That should be the first action taken.
I mean, I'd just add to what Roy said very quickly. I know we're over time, but the UK. I think the suspension word is overused and it implies something much greater than it actually is. The UK system does not suspend licenses, it suspends licensing processes. That essentially means when it triggers it, the in-trays of officials and ministers stop. So what's in the system stops. It doesn't suspend any of the licenses that are already in play, allowing deliveries. And if you were serious about wanting, because the idea of the suspension mechanism came in from the response to the Arab Spring, which was when crisis erupts very quickly, you want to freeze very quickly licenses to stop whilst the situation stabilises or whatever. So I think you really do need to be moving to a situation where you can suspend licenses, not just the licensing process. The UK government does revoke, but it doesn't revoke that many if you look at the annual reporting data.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are massively over time. We've got a few